Good morning and welcome to this Fronius webinar on the subject of the new TS100 smart meter. As you've just seen, one of the key benefits of using Fronius inverters is that you can use our SolarWeb platform, and that incorporates a lot of data, not just from your solar system, but also from your wider site usage of energy and consumption from the grid. And a key part of that is to have a smart meter installed. So we'll be having a look today at the new unit, how to install that, how to commission it, and also looking at the promotion that we're running for the next 2 months. My name is David Porter. I'm one of the technical advisors here at Fronius in the UK. So I cover the south of the UK and also Ireland. And I'm also joined today by Natalie Woodford, who is our marketing and FSP coordinator. So throughout the course of the presentation, if you have any questions on the products or the commissioning process, feel free to drop those in, and Natalie will be raising those questions at the end of the presentation. So we'll look first of all at the benefits of installing a smart meter, looking at the data, looking at the control of devices, and then we'll have a look at the single phase versions that we have available, and we'll focus on the new TS100. We'll then look into the installation and the commissioning of that smart meter, and we'll also look at the additional documentation that we can provide around smart meters, making sure that you're choosing the right unit for the right installation. And then we'll talk about the new promotion. That's the free smart meter when you buy a Primo snap-in or Gen 24 inverter. And then finally, we'll have the question and answer session at the end of the session. So let's have a look first of all at the benefits of installing a smart meter. So of course, the smart meter enables you to record the energy flowing into and out of your building, meaning that we can calculate the energy balance. We can look at the consumption of all of your different loads within the building, and we can see the implication of having PV on that load. We can then control the export back to the grid. So feed in reduction, zero export control is all powered through having a smart meter installed. We can also log additional loads and generators on site. So if you have a wind turbine or a diesel generator or a non-Fronius PV inverter, we can incorporate that data into SolarWeb so we can see all of your generation through Fronius SolarWeb. We can also look at your self-consumption rate. So the more of the energy you use on site yourself, the better your savings. And we can calculate that accurately and automatically through SolarWeb, all down to having that smart meter installed. Also, particularly important for installers is being able to use the information for energy consulting. So this means that you can record real life data for your customers. Maybe after a year of having a PV system installed, you can then go back and review with your customer and potentially upsell other devices, upsell batteries, EV charging, hot water heating, all of those sorts of things. We obviously need to have the smart meter installed to control a battery, so to control the charging and discharging when you have surplus energy or you have a deficit and you need to discharge that battery. Similarly for energy management and our own pilot, so switching on various different loads when you have your surplus energy instead of sending it back to the grid. So all of these functions are available using one of our smart meters. What I'd like to ask now is who's actually using the smart meter already, and what are your main reasons for using smart meters? So we have a quick poll question here. So what do you use the Fronius smart meter for? And if you could click as many answers are as relevant for you. Are you using the smart meter for energy usage information to see what's happening within the property? Are you using the meter for export limitation, battery management, control of loads within the site, or so far have you not used the smart meter? If you just enter your answers and hit the submit button at the bottom of the screen, that would be brilliant. Let's have a look at the results. So we can see See a good mix here. So a lot of people are already using it purely for the information benefits, the usage of energy within your site. Very useful, simple feature. We recommend having the smart meter installed pretty much every installation so that you can get that idea of your energy consumption. Export limitation, unsurprisingly, is the most common usage for the smart meter. Traditionally, the smart meters were installed just for that purpose, but now with all the additional load management technology that we can provide, we're seeing more of a move towards having the battery management and the intelligent load management installed. Obviously, with our new Gen 24 inverters, we're expecting to see the battery management being a much more important aspect of smart meter installations. And yep, great to see that there's a number of people there who haven't used the smart meter yet. Hopefully, over the course of the next few minutes, you'll see some of the benefits. And with the promotion that we'll be discussing today, you'll be able to try using that for yourself, experience it, and see the benefits. Okay, perfect. So the first thing we'll have a look at is the benefit of the visualization in SolarWeb. So if you take the standard view of Fronius SolarWeb, what you can see is the power from your PV inverters, so shown here in the current power window. That simply shows you the power output from your inverters instantaneously, and then here in the energy balance today, you see the load profile for the day. Okay, that's useful information, but if you install the smart meter, you can see a lot of additional information. We now have our bubble diagram, which not only shows the current energy being produced, we can see the amount of energy being consumed within the building. Potentially, we can see the battery consumption and the state of charge, and we can also see if we're using any energy from the grid or exporting to the grid. The energy balance view now changes. We now see grey overnight where we're using energy from the grid, and in the yellow we see energy that we're exporting back to the grid. So in a perfect situation, you would actually see no grey and no yellow on the energy balance today. You'd be purely using your own electricity. Obviously, in real world situations, you're always going to be using a little bit. You're going to be sending a little bit back to the grid, but we're obviously targeting getting that to an absolute minimum and being as self-sufficient as possible. With that smart meter installed, you're then able to undertake simulations based on your customer's real data. So we can actually see what happens. What if you install a battery, or what if you install an own pilot for heating? Simply go to the simulation page in SolarWeb, choose the device you want to install, for example, battery here, hit the simulate button, and then SolarWeb will go through the previous year's data, looking for all the energy that you've exported to the grid, the surplus energy, and the energy that you've had to use from the grid overnight, and calculate the benefit that you would have had from having a battery system installed. You can try this with various different size batteries, and as a result, you'll be able to work out the best size for you. This is great information for an installer who can then go back to their customer and potentially upsell the battery solution and show them the real benefit to them individually. So it's a really nice, simple tool to use. Once you have that battery or own pilot installed, you're then able to see all of your information for all those different devices in one place. And of course, the key to this is having that smart meter in place so that you're able to control the charge of the battery early in the morning, or the hot water heating when you want to get that water up to a higher temperature. It all comes down to the key component, which is the smart meter. Over longer periods of time, again, you can pick up trends. You can see the difference between the summer months, the winter months. You can see when you're using additional hot water, when you're using the battery to its best capacity, and again, all requiring that smart meter to provide the additional information. So we've had a look at the visualization benefits. Let's have a look at those control benefits as well for controlling the energy management and power reduction. So with a typical PV system, you may have an inverter, you may have a number of loads on site, you may have a battery, you may have an own pilot. You'll also need to have that smart meter. And what the system's always trying to do is to make sure that any surplus energy is diverted to the own pilot or the battery. Obviously, when that device reaches full capacity, the inverter starts to fire up at full power, we might see some energy going back to the grid. And in order to provide export limitation to stop energy going back to the grid, the smart meter values are simply used to throttle back the inverter output. So what we see is a reduction in the output of the inverter. So obviously, the bigger the battery or using a bigger loads on site mean that you don't have to throttle back the inverter so much. So adding all these extra devices, the smart loads, the own pilot, means that your inverter can work at full power rather than having to throttle back under export limit conditions. So let's look at the smart meter itself. We've had a look at the functionality and the impact it has on the PV system. Let's have a look at the individual devices. Some of you have been installing smart meters already, may be familiar with the UL240 meter. So up until now, this has been the key meter for the single phase market. And this is a CT meter, so it has this current transformer, which clamps around the incoming mains cable, measures the current, and then tells us which direction energy is flowing, and also tells us the amount of energy that's being used on site. So it's a simple meter to install, but it does have to take its own enclosure. You do have to manage that CT, get it secure around the cables. So there is potential for either getting the CT back to front, having it loose, maybe making a mistake with the wiring. The advantage of the new TS100 meter is it is a direct connect meter. It doesn't need a CT, and it fits nice and neatly within a distribution board. So it's a DIN rail mounted device, and it takes up just 2 DIN rail slots. So as you see next to these MCBs, it fits securely within the enclosure. And without having a CT, it means that we simply connect in from the main switch into the smart meter and then out to the loads. It's a very simple solution as long as you have the space within your enclosure. You can obviously install it in a separate box next to your enclosure. That's always an option. But if you do have difficulties with space, you've always still got the option of the CT meter. The Smart Meter TS100 has other advantages. It is rated to 100 amps, so it's suitable for almost all UK and Irish domestic installations, and it has a terminal cross-sectional area of 25 mil. So that means that you're able to use most, it's designed to be used with most residential incoming connections. It's also important to note that this meter is significantly cheaper than the CT meters. So there's a significant cost benefit by using this meter rather than the CT meter, as well as potential easier installation. So let's have a look at the installation for the meter. Very simply, we connect the supply phase cable, the live cable, into terminal 1 and then out to the loads from terminal 2. The neutral connection fits through down into the terminal on the bottom of the device here, and we have our data connection here. So we have a three core cable going to our data manager. We need data plus, data minus, and ground. And if you have a Gen 24 inverter, it's a similar process. It's just that we use the terms Modbus 0 plus and minus and ground at the bottom, but very similar installation process. And also on the device, we have a termination resistor, which is enabled by just linking between terminals 3 and 5, and that switches on the termination resistor. So for the last device in the line, which is probably going to be this smart meter, just make sure that you've linked out between terminals 3 and 5. There's no CTs to set up. The Modbus address is set automatically to 1, so there's very little programming to do with this new smart meter. Simply a case of physical installation and then activating that from the inverter. So within the inverter, we then need to go to our data manager or our Gen 24 inverter, Connect as you would to commission a new system in SolarWeb, and we'll be using our technician wizard to detect the smart meter and incorporate that into our SolarWeb system. Before we start that, it's very important to have a look at the software version of your data manager. This is a new smart meter, so we need to make sure that we're on the latest firmware version for your data manager. You can always check that from the little information button at the top of the screen. It will show the software version, and if that's below 3.16, we'd recommend you click on the search for firmware updates and automatically update your firmware to the latest version. There, once you've done that, you'll be able to detect the smart meter and use the system. So let's click on the technician wizard and we'll go through the process. A number of the pages are very similar on the technician wizard to the SolarWeb wizard until you get to the meter setup page. The first thing you want to do is to click on the meter drop-down and choose your Fronius smart meter. Once you've done that, click on settings. The device will now search for that smart meter, and hopefully you should see the status is okay, and you'll see a consumption reading for that smart meter. Make sure that it's set for the feed-in point. This just means that the meter is located where you're potentially feeding energy back to the grid. And then the next page is to go to the dynamic power reduction. So as a standard, we allow all energy to go back to the grid. There's no limit on power export. We can change that to the limit for the entire system. We can set the power of the PV system, so that's for the array up on the roof, and then the maximum amount of energy that can go back to the grid. So typically for a single phase system under G98, we'll set that to 3,680 watts. Once you've done that, click forward, and you'll go back to the main overview page on your data manager. You'll now be able to see the power from your inverter, and you'll also see the consumption from the grid or potentially the export to the grid. So it's a fairly simple process. Once if you've got an existing system on SolarWeb, you simply go to that technician wizard page, run through, and add the smart meter into your system. You can also add multiple smart meters onto the same site. So this can be a benefit for customers who want to see certain loads. You might have very high loads for something like a pool pump or a heating system. You might have an EV charger that you want to integrate into your SolarWeb page. Also, you can add your additional generators, so things like your wind turbine or some non-Fronius inverters. That can all be incorporated into SolarWeb by adding additional smart meters. And of course, being a lower cost unit, the TS100 makes a lot of sense to be used in line for each of those individual devices. You can have up to 4 smart meters with a snap inverter, and you can have up to 8 smart meters with the Gen 24s. The only caveat for that is if you have an own pilot, that will take up one of the positions. So you'll have either 3 or 7 devices plus an own pilot. But for most installs, you're going to be looking at up to 4 or up to 8 smart meters per site, which I'm sure is plenty for most people. And the installation for multiple smart meters, again, is pretty simple. So as you saw before, we have the 2 data cables, the orange and the orange stripe, and we have the green ground cable. Now all we're doing is crimping those into a bootlace ferrule, connecting into the meter, and then going to the next meter in the system. So it's a very simple daisy chain through all of the devices, making sure that we have the termination resistor on the first and the last devices enabled. We'll also then just need to change the Modbus address for each device. So we need them all to have their unique address so that we can identify each meter individually. And this is done through the meter display. So the buttons on the screen of the meter, they're touch sensitive, hence the name TS. And one press incrementally increases and decreases the numbers on screen. And the long press, enter, is the enter button to accept a setting. So to change the Modbus address, all we need to do is to set the password to 2633. Follow through the menus to address, and then change the Modbus address for your additional meters. Make it maybe 2, 3, 4, up to 8. Click enter, and that will store the new Modbus address for your additional meters. Then back on our data manager settings, we simply add our secondary meter into the system, give it a name, and make sure we determine whether it's a generation meter or a load meter, a consumption meter. Once you've done that, SolarWeb is automatically able to integrate that into the data, and you're able to see what's happening on your site with those additional loads or additional generators. Here you can see the various different loads incorporated into the graph page. A typical site here, we've got 2 PV systems, a heater and an ohm pilot, and we've even got some garden lighting that we can just see in the evening with a couple of spikes there. So it's an example of somebody who's used a number of smart meters to get a good profile of their energy. And back on that main page of SolarWeb as well, where we have the bubble diagram, we'll then see the wind turbine or other generator data incorporated into your main generation data. So all of your energy balances, the bubble diagrams, they'll now incorporate all of your additional generation information. So obviously we get a lot of questions on a daily basis on the smart meters. It is a bit of a complex subject and some people do struggle a little bit. And as a result, we've put together our information brochure. And this gives you a guide to the different smart meters available. It also talks through what sort of CTs you need for a CT meter, and helps with a useful flowchart, which explains which meter you need for different types of projects. So we'll make a copy of this available after the presentation, so please download it and have a look through. Open it up and have a look at the flowchart. When you're installing a new system, it's worth working through this flowchart to determine which smart meter to use. So, for example, if you want a site with export limitation and a direct connection is possible, and it's a single phase system, you'll be guided through to the Fronius TS100 meter. If you can't do the direct connection, maybe there's no space in your consumer unit, so you want to use a CT meter, that's fine. We follow through and come down to the UL smart meter, which we saw briefly earlier. But we're expecting to see most people are going to move across to the TS100. It's so much cheaper, it's nice and tidy installation, it's simple to install, less chances for making mistakes during the install process. So we're expecting to see this TS100 becoming the primary choice for single phase installations. On the back page of the brochure, you can also see a comparison of the features of all the different smart meters. Obviously, with the TS100, there's no CTs required, but it's able to undertake all the different functions in a PV system, including export limitation. You can also see the dimensions of the device, the software that's required, and also the mounting methodology for that system. So please take a good look at that. Hopefully it will answer most of your questions on smart meters. But if not, feel free to contact tech support. We'll be able to assist with any other questions you may have on smart meters. So very importantly, we're running a promotion now for the new TS100 meter. So for every you get a free smart meter with every Gen 24 Primo and Snap-in Primo inverter that you purchase between the 1st of May and the 30th of June. So simply order your inverters from your normal distributors. They'll be able to offer that to you free of charge during that promotion period, and you'll receive that yourself. We've had questions, what if you can't install the TS100 on the installation? Well, keep hold of that smart meter. You can use that on your next project. Make sure to use it where you have a customer who would benefit from your energy profiling or the export limitation. We really want people to start using this meter and get a good feel for how easy it is to install. Obviously, to use this with a Primo snap-in inverter, it needs to be a full version as well. So please order a full version if you go for the snap inverter option. But the promotion will run until the 30th of June. Additionally, with our new Gen 24 inverters, which are now available, if you're looking to install one of those over the coming months, please contact us at Fronius, and we'll be able to offer you site support for your first installation. We're very happy to come to site, support you through the commissioning process within one day, and get that installation up and running with you so that you're confident moving forward to install the inverters yourself in future. So that is all of the key topics I wanted to cover today. As you see on the screen, if you need to get in contact with us, you'll have our tech support line. Any inquiries around our Fronius system partner, sales and repairs, all on the screen there. So please feel free to get in contact with us, and we'll be very pleased to answer any questions you may have. Okay, so at this point, I will see if Natalie has any questions for us.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So yes, David, we've got a few questions come through. So the first one we have is, can we achieve export limitation to UK requirements using the TS100?
Yes, so the TS100 is G100 compliant. We have a declaration available which we can send through for all of the G100 compliant meters. Because it doesn't have a CT required, there's no issues around CT detection. So again, that's a real benefit from using the TS100 smart meter.
Lovely, thank you. And what distance can the TS100 be from the inverter compared to a CT smart meter option?
So the distance would be the same because they're both using Modbus. They're using Modbus RTU. So we can run up to 100 meters from between the smart meter and the inverter. Obviously, using a better quality cable, making sure you have the termination resistors set up means that you'll have the better quality of connection. But wherever possible, keep that run as short as possible. You can always also, if you have a very long run, buy a data manager box and install that close to the smart meter. You can then have up to 1,000 meters between the data manager and the inverters. So I'm sure in most installations we'll be able to find a solution for you.
Perfect. And we've got another one of what's happened to the 50 kA meter?
So the 50 kA meter was a smart meter we offered up until 2020. That meter has now been discontinued. That meter required a lot of modifications to the CTs to make it G100 compliant. So it was both expensive and quite difficult to install. So as a result, we've replaced that with the UL, the black meter that you saw earlier, which has the CT detection enabled, and also with the TS100, which doesn't need CTs at all. So the 50 kA meter is no more, but it has been replaced both with a CT and a direct connect option.
Brilliant. And then we've got if export limitation is not available for the TS range, what was the setting of export level for and then it's a bracket of 3,680 watts if not export limitation?
So yeah, to clarify, export limitation is possible with the TS100. So that's fully compliant with G100 for export limitation. So the figure of 3,680 watts, that was the setting for export on the system as an example. That could be 0 if you have a 0 export site. But yes, very important that both of the smart meters you've seen today, the TS100 and the UL240, they are both compliant with G100 for export limitation.
Brilliant. And that's all the questions that we've got.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you on future webinars and training courses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.